Please, take care of yourself, father." The words of his son echoed within Senjo's ears as he sat on the igwa, surrounded by the defeating silence that seemed to swaddle his comprehensions. They were Kojo's last words to him, a plea to live and not to follow in the destructive path he had chosen. And now, his youngest son, Senjiro, had repeated them back before he had left. Senjiro's hand hovered over the sake bottle, his trembling fingers for a stark reminder of his weakness. His eyes, once stern and filled with blinding rage, were now red and puffy from tears. It's been so long since he allowed himself to cry. He couldn't even remember the first time he did. The second had been when he lost his father. The third was when he had lost his mother. And lastly, when he lost his beloved wife, Ruka. Senjiro took another swig of the sake, the warm liquid burning a path down his throat, the fiery sting doing little to numb the pain in his heart. He looked down at the bottle, the amber liquid swirling around like a whirlpool of his regret and anger. Would the next drink be my last? He wondered. Unfortunately, he didn't sit around to find out as he staggered to his feet and stumbled away from the bottle. Everything hurt. The alcohol didn't dull the pain anymore. It just made him feel more pathetic, more lost. It felt like a ball enchained against his feet, dragging behind him with every step he took. He lavishly made his way through the house, his feet feeling like they were made of lead, which stepped echoed through the house. A streak reminder it's just him. He had nearly forgotten the layout of the house. Was it always this big, he wondered, considering the living room had become his personal living space. Senjiro stumbled into a room, the soji door sliding open like a whisper. It was the very room that held the tatama, the family memorial altar. It had been a long time since he had stepped foot in here, the smell of incense thick in the air. Flickering the light on, Senjiro was met with a large rosewood cabinet with brass doors. Inside laid several monumental monuments engraved with the names of his ancestors, a reminder of the proud legacy he had failed to uphold. However, it was an 8x10 framed photo of Ruka, smiling at him with a gentle smile that brought him to his knees. The pain washed over him like a tsunami, crashing into his chest and threatening to pull under him. The jag of the sake fell to the floor beside him with a shatter, the liquid spilling out. As he stumbled towards the altar, he fell to his knees with a soft thud, his shoulders slumping as he glanced at Ruka's smiling face. His hand reached out, trembling, to touch the frame that held the image of his beloved wife. Even in a photo, she was beautiful, and Senjiro felt his heart ache and long for her. He felt like a man lost at sea, clinging to the only piece of driftwood he had left. Ruka. He choked out her name. I'm sorry, he said, through clenched teeth. What a fool I've been, he whispered, his vision blurring with tears that now fell freely. Senjiro's hand hovered over the framed portrait of Ruka, his eyes tracing the contours of her face. I failed you, he whispered hoarsely, his voice thick with emotion. I failed the Rengoku name. He had thrown himself into the bottle, letting his grief consume him. It was easier than facing the reality that she was gone. It was easier than watching his son grow into a man without his mother. It was easier than dealing with his own failures as a demon slayer and a father. I failed Kojo and Senjiro. Blech. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud, heavy with the weight of his regret. Senjiro's hand dropped to his side, his gaze fell, and his head lowered. I'm sorry, he muttered to himself, the alcohol no longer numbing the pain but uplifting it instead. Hot tears streamed down his cheeks, mixing with the sake stains on his robe. He had abandoned his role as a Hashira, leaving the duty to uphold the Rengoku name and protect humanity. The flame that had once burned so brightly within him had been reduced to a flickering ember. Smoldering by his grief and disillusionment, with the very last breath that defined his existence. "Please take care of your body, father." The words of Kojiro's words echoed in Shinjiro's mind, pulling him back from the brink of despair. Kojiro? The name slipped out of his mouth like a prayer. Kojiro had risked his life to save people aboard the Mugen train and had died. However, he was revived by Lady Utsu Furiwa, Yin's guardian. At first, Shinjiro didn't want to believe it. It felt surreal, like a twisted dream, yet the words of the Kasukai Crow reverted in his mind, a flicker of hope, struggling to push aside the dark shroud of doubt. And now, Kojiro was currently at the Butterfly Mansion in a comatose state and still recovering from its injuries. "My boy, my son." Shinjiro's words cracked as he wept before the altar, the weight of his regret crushing him like an invisible vice. He didn't want Kojiro becoming a demon slayer, and had berated him for his choices. The realization of his failure as a father was a dagger to his heart. It would have seemed that furious punch from Tanjiro had knocked some sense into him. It, and had some good things too. He's been a terrible person. He needed something like that. "I have to go see my son," Shinjiro thought as he staggered out of the room. He needed to see Kojiro. He needed to go see Kojiro. He needed to apologize. He needed to apologize for not supporting his happiness, for being drunk, and for being a disappointment of a father. He needed to make amends. Shinjiro only hoped he's not too late to make things right. You frowned, your eyes narrowing slightly at the sight of your father-in-law. "What are you doing here, Shinjiro-sama?" you asked, your voice a hint of annoyance. You hadn't forgot what Tanjiro had told you about the fight, and the tension was palpable in the air. You tightened your grip on Taiyu, feeling protective over your baby and Kojiro. "You've got some nerve showing up here." You spoke coldly, your eyes not leaving the man who had once been so boorish, so distant. You couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and disgust as you stared at him. Shinjiro stammered slightly under your cold gaze. He knew you were upset, but he hadn't expected the raw hospitality in your tone. I just came to check on Kojiro," he admitted, his eyes darting between you and his comatose son. I'm sorry." Shinjiro stuttered, rubbing the back of his neck. His voice trailed off as he searched for the right words. You noticed how anxious he seemed. He wasn't acting like his normal self, the ill-tempered and arrogant man you had known for the past year. In fact, he wasn't even carrying his jug of sake with him, which was quite unusual. "So, how was Kojiro?" His golden and red eyes glanced over at the bed where Kojiro laid unconscious. Shinjiro felt a lump rise in his throat. His boy, his eldest son, the last he saw him, Kojiro was smiling and full of fire. And now, he lay there, motionless and silent. He felt his heart heavy with guilt, remembering all the awful things he said, from the hatred arguments to the drunken rages. He knew he hadn't been the best father to Kojiro and Shinjiro since Ruka's passing. He'd given up on everything, and now it felt like complete shit. You scoffed. "As you can see, he's still in a coma," you reply, "but he's still stable." That brings relief to Shinjiro as he releases a breath he didn't know he was holding back. "That's good," he replies, turning his soft gaze back towards you. You could see the regret etched in every line of his face. His eyes, once cold and stern, now held a hint of sadness and defeat. Clearly he's been crying. However, that still doesn't help you ease your irritation. You were angry. Angry at how he treated Kojiro, Shinjiro, and even Tanjiro. You know, Tanjiro is here, you said, not bothering to hide the accusations in your voice. He told me what happened. Sanjiro flinched, his eyes dropping to the floor. Is that so? He muttered. Yeah, and I have to say, you should feel ashamed. You quenched. How dare you insult your own son after he risked his life to save so many lives? The Rengoku patriot remained silent, his gaze refusing to meet yours, as the weight of his past actions bore down on him heavily. How can you be so cruel to your own flesh and blood? What? Is it because he became a demon slayer when you gave up? Kojiro became a demon slayer because he wanted to save and protect people. You continued, your voice laced with accusation. And what did you do? You sat around, drowning in your own pity and despair. He looked up to you, and you couldn't even bother to support him. Sanjiro felt his throat tighten as tears began to well in his eyes. He didn't blame you for being upset with him. In fact, he knew it had been coming. Plus, you didn't even come to our wedding, you continued, your voice laced with accusation. You weren't even there when your own grandson was born. His eyes closed, allowing tears to slip down his cheeks unannounced. You had every right to be rebunked with him. But Sanjiro knew that. He's being a terrible person and failed as a father. He gave up his duty as a demon slayer, shamed his son, and reverted to an alcoholism to cope. I know, he said, his voice quivering and whispered, and I'm sorry. His words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and thick with regret. I'm so sorry for everything. He choked out, his voice hoarse. You stared at him, your eyes narrowed. And why say it now? Opening his eyes, Sanjiro looked up to you, his expression earnest. Since Ruka's death, I simply gave up my duty as a demon slayer and turned to alcohol to cope. You remained silent, watching him immensely as he spoke. Despite your anger, you again felt a pang of pity for the man. Ruka was his entire world, along with Kojiro and Sanjiro. But, however, after her death due to an illness, Sanjiro lost control and spiraled into a depression. He abandoned his duties as a demon slayer and father and began drinking his sorrows away. I was a fool, and I couldn't be more ashamed. You darn well should be, you retorted, not letting the anger in your voice waver. However, you paused a little upon seeing tears in Sanjiro's eyes and took a deep breath before continuing. Look, I'm sorry for your loss. Truly, I am. But that doesn't mean you give the right to treat your family the way you did. I know, and again, I'm so sorry. With that, hot tears flowed freely down Sanjiro's face. The dam finally broke as he sobbed softly. You watch as he slowly lowers himself to his knees, then the way to the floor, his forehead touching the floor in a doizena, the traditional Japanese apology, received for the greatest of mistakes. I've been a terrible father. Sanjiro's voice was raw with emotion, his body trembling as he maintained the dozen position. His heart was filled with pain and regret for shunning his sons and bringing shame to the Rengoku family name. I'll apologize for every harsh word, every cruel action, and every time I failed to be there for Kojiro and Sanjiro. Sanjiro's voice cracked, and he continued his plea. I've been a disgrace not only to my family, but to the Rengoku name and the demon-slaying course. Your anger slowly morphed into a mix of pity and frustration as you watched the once mighty man before you, now brought to his knees in a show of ultimate remorse. His sobs grew louder, echoing through the scenic room. I'm sorry, Kojiro. I'm sorry, Ruka. I'm sorry, Sanjiro. Sanjiro's voice was barely a whisper as he apologized to everyone. He had failed. I have every right to be scolded. I am a disgrace. Hearing and watching him break down before you, something within you began to shift. The anger and resentment you had built up against Sanjiro began to waver, and you felt a sudden rush of emotion. And before you knew it, tears had begun to fall from your own eyes as well. Despite Sanjiro's flaws, he was Kojiro's father and your child's grandfather. You had been this sincerity in Kojiro's eyes every time he talked about his father, implying he still loved and respected him. This is a man who loved his family fiercely, and seeing him in this state to despair and regret had you tearing up. You understand his inner turmoil and pain completely, considering you had almost lost Kojo. I know it's not enough, Shinjiro added, but I want to make amends. Please forgive me for my insolence. You took a shaky breath, trying to hold back your own emotions as he continued to apologize. It was clear the elder Rengoku was truly repented, and you didn't have the heart to continue scolding him. You knew that holding on to anger wouldn't help anyone, especially not Kojiro, now who laid unknowingly of the turmoil outside of his comatose state. You took a deep breath and stepped closer to the promiscuous figure of your father-in-law. You reached down, placing a hand on his back. Get up, Shinjiro-sama, you said firmly and gently. The man hesitates for a moment before doing as told. He stands, his body still and shaking from his sobs, and his eyes, red from crying, slowly met your gaze, and it's as if a moment he briefly sees Ruka glancing at him with the same gentle yet firm gaze she had. Shinjiro then slowly diverts his attention to the sleeping baby boy in your arms, and feels his heart swell with pride, seeing how much Taiyu resembles Kojo and himself. It felt like deja vu. For what it's worth, I forgive you, you firmly state, your voice filled with a mix of compassion and resolve. But you need to promise me one thing, you add, looking straight him in the eyes. Anything, he slowly whispers. Clean up your act. No more alcohol, no more self-pity. Take care of yourself. And be a father Kojiro can be proud of.